do. I love telling stories with cameras. I'm going to talk about a video that I shot on the Nikon Z9, which is a flagship, incredible tool for shooting video content. But my background really is in the adventure sports world. I love being outside. I love being in the mountains with a camera in tow. I fell in love with photography and rock climbing at the same time when I was 13 years old, so a long time ago, almost 3 decades ago. And when I started taking photos of rock climbing, there was no course on how to photograph rock climbing. It was a lot of figuring out, how do you do this? How do you get to the top of the rock so that then you can be down below shooting the climber? So there was a lot of experimentation, and I kind of like that aspect of storytelling and adventure photography, solving problems. All of the principles in photography apply to photographing adventure sports, right? As photographers, as storytellers, we're always trying to find new ways of photographing the world around us. And this is a great example. I'm trying to find an interesting way to photograph a rock climber clipping a rope. And so we're always, as photographers, we're changing our angle, we're switching lenses, we're playing with aperture, it's those subtle adjustments that oftentimes make the image go from okay to good to great, right? And everyone in this room understands we're striving for great. That's our goal. We're trying to make interesting, compelling pictures. One of the things that I realized early on is that unlike the football field or the soccer pitch, the best athletes in the world share the same climbing areas. They just climb on the steeper rocks. And so early on in my career, I started to meet some pretty amazing people. This is Beth Rodden, now a longtime friend. And no, this is not upside down. This is how Beth was climbing. And the beauty of photographing in outdoor adventure environments is that the light is constantly changing. You can study these environments, and oftentimes the athletes try hard and they don't get the climb the first time, so they come back day after day. And as photographers, we love that because we sort of study the light, we study the subject, and on day one we make a nice picture, we critique it on our computers, and then on day 2 when they're trying again, we get to continue to refine the photograph. Of course, with wildlife that's hard to do because they're fleeting moments, but with adventure photography oftentimes we have that opportunity. Technology's really played a big role in my career as a photography. When I was shooting on film, pictures like this were really hard to capture, almost impossible. This is Tommy Caldwell climbing 2,000 feet off the ground in Yosemite National Park, and he's illuminated by his headlamp, an LED headlamp, and I had a bike light, the same type of light that you'd stick on your bike to commute across Manhattan, and it was shining on him. My assistant was holding the light, just shining the LED. And you can see it's a very long exposure to capture the background in Yosemite with kind of low light that we're mixing from his headlamp and the bike light. This is possible because we're shooting on cameras that have incredibly high ISO, low light sensitivity. Part of it is shooting the peak action, but it's also the in-between moments. This is Kevin Jorgensen. This is called a portal edge, and he's sleeping on the side of El Capitan. This is his hotel room for 10 days while he was trying to free climb El Capitan, a 3,000-foot wall in Yosemite. I'm trying to be a photojournalist in these situations and document the in-between moments, not just that peak action, but he's studying his hands because his fingers are really hurting, and he has a big night ahead of him. You know, I think one of the things as photographers that we're thinking about, whether you're shooting adventure sports or whether you're shooting wildlife or whether you're shooting soccer, it's how can you put yourself in a unique position that's unexpected, right? When you put yourself in a unique position, oftentimes that leads to more interesting photographs. Some of you might recognize this ladder. You might own one of these, and it's in your garage. You can buy it at Home Depot. It's called the Little Giant. And so we dreamt up this project, this idea of what if we strapped it onto the wall so I could be just a little further away. And this is Alex Honnold. Some of you might know from the film Free Solo. And you know, all of those experiments you try, but it doesn't always work. In this case, it actually made a pretty nice photo. It just got me far enough away from the wall that it gave me a unique perspective. You know, just subtle. It's a little farther than if I'm just hanging on the rope. You know, I always think about what is it that I bring to the table that the person sitting to my right or left might not have that skill set. And I wish I had more to offer, but I don't mind hanging on a rope. That's my thing. I'm comfortable in vertical environments. But I think that's a question you want to ask yourself. What is it that you bring to your photography, your storytelling, that's unique, that makes your pictures a little different? Here I am photographing Dane Jackson. You know, and it creates a unique perspective. I'm with a fisheye lens. I'm right there on top of him as this waterfall is spitting him out, and it made for a nice image. Let me ask by a show of hands, how many folks have slept at 20,000 feet or higher? And an airplane doesn't count. Not on an airplane. I know we all have. Well, here's the deal. Sleeping at 20,000 feet, you don't sleep very well. This is in the Karakoram Mountains in Pakistan. And we're on a ridge line in Pakistan, and we've been climbing all day, and we dug out this snow cave, and we're trying to get out of the wind. And I saw that the sun was setting in the background, and eventually the ambient exposure of that sky in the background was going to match the ambient exposure of their headlamps. But it was about an hour away, and I'm tired, I have a headache, I'm dehydrated, it's cold, the wind is blowing in my face. And I thought to myself, and this is the game that we play as creative people, I just needed to trick myself and think about everything about where I was in that moment. So I thought about getting home and petting my dog, buying a Chipotle burrito back in the United States, and I just waited and waited and waited, and I embraced that discomfort, right? You just embrace this idea that by suffering a little bit, I might make an interesting picture. And it led to an interesting picture. I have this really strong belief that when you kind of put yourself in those slightly compromised, slightly uncomfortable positions, it oftentimes leads to better pictures. I have this rule of thumb that if you're sitting in your living room watching the sunrise out the window and drinking coffee, you're probably missing pictures. Or if you're drinking a cocktail and you're watching the sunset out the window, you're probably missing a photo opportunity. And don't get me wrong, I like coffee and cocktails, but to make pictures, you've got to be there. Like, you've got to be out there doing it. You know, one of the things I love about adventure photography is I have to be a participant. You know, that you can't do this from the sidelines. You've got to be walking with the athletes. And I'm constantly making this decision. You know, I only have so much gas in the tank, only so much fuel, and I'm trying to decide when am I going to pull my camera out and run ahead and take the picture, because I'm not asking them to stop. I'm there, I'm a photojournalist, I'm documenting what it is they're doing. And so I'm constantly making those decisions, and I love that part of my job is to stay fit and be athletic and be prepared to be with the athletes. There is one little thing that if you look closely, I have one of the athletes carrying my tripod, because there's just this reality that these are the best athletes in the world. And while I can try to keep up with them, we still have to share the load. And oftentimes that's a conversation that I have in advance with them. You know, I love diverse subjects. My roots are in the climbing world, but I love just being in natural environments with interesting people, whether whether that's photographing mountain biking in Utah. I'm always looking for interesting challenges. I find that sometimes my creativity is really peaking when I'm actually in an environment that challenges me, when my heart's beating at 160 beats per second, and there's a little sweat in my eyes. I'm dealing with, snow getting in my camera bag. But it's through those kind of challenges that I find I'm oftentimes getting into that higher level of creativity. The challenge equals creativity. My philosophy is I always say yes. I love to try new things. This was water-filled cave diving photography, and there's no filters in this photo. This was in the Yucatan Peninsula, and there's a layer of algae. You would never even think of going in this cenote. It just looked like green slime. And then as you descended down into the cenote, you looked back up, and the sun shining through this green algae led to this orange light. And again, you don't know until you're there. You've just got to try it. That's part of the spirit of photography. Put yourself in these unique situations. I want to talk about a special project that I had the opportunity to work on, and that was shooting a video with the new Z9 when it was launched. And this is, rarely do you get to see these photos. Maybe I'm not even supposed to show this photo, but this is a group of us got called to Melville, New York, which is the North American headquarters for Nikon. And we all signed NDAs and we were sworn to secrecy. And my good friend Mike Corrado, who's sitting in the front row here, is standing there, and we're one of the first teams being briefed in on the Nikon Z9. And what was amazing about all of us, the folks sitting at this table, is we were given this opportunity, a blank white canvas and a budget, and it was, think about a project. Some of us were doing still photos, some of us were shooting videos that illustrate some of the power of the Z9. And so I've already shared with you, I love rock climbing, I love the outdoors. So I dreamt up a project which was to photograph rock climbing in my backyard in Lake Tahoe, California, where I live. Now the problem was, as I was kind of pitching this idea back to the team in Melville, fires were breaking out in the America West. And about a week before we were going to shoot, we were evacuated from Lake Tahoe. The basin was filled with smoke. And this is part of being a creative, is you need a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. No one wants to hear the excuse, it's just not going to work. You've got to come up with solutions. And so we pivoted at the last minute and called in favors and begged the city of Boulder, Colorado to allow us to shoot in the Front Range of Colorado. And the concept that I pitched to the team at Nikon USA was oftentimes athletes go out at night, rock climbers go out at night because the temperatures are cooler and they can hang on to the rock. And so I wanted to do just a short film that illustrated this idea of oftentimes while we're sleeping, there's a group of athletes out there out in the mountains climbing on rocks, bouldering without a rope. And so this is just a short film shot on the Z9. We're going to watch the film, and then we'll go ahead and kind of unpack it and talk about how we shot the film and some of the attributes of the Z9. So here we go. Night.